Welcome to episode 52 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined in virtual studio by my good friend, my co-host, my colleague, and the man who is ready to crown the New York Knicks the 2020-2021 NBA champions, John Scott Sloat.
Doc, how you doing?
I'm doing well. This is the last episode of 2020.
Yeah, it's the last episode of 2020. We just got done with Christmas. How was your Christmas?
It was good. We were in the great city of Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, nice. Classic Christmas city, Omaha.
Yes, to spend time with my wife's family there. So that was quite nice. What about you guys? Where were you at?
Yeah, so we were with my wife's family in St. Louis. So we were both middle America there for a time. Yes.
Though, from what I understand, your Christmas had a little bit more of an international flavor than perhaps mine did.
That's right. My wife's sister's boyfriend was there. He's from the UK, so he obviously couldn't go home. And he brought a British Christmas to us. So we had beans on toast for breakfast. We did a flaming Christmas pudding for dessert. It was quite lovely.
Okay. Very nice. Well, we had no such international intrigue in in Omaha. But in any case, if you'd like to connect with us on the podcast, you can find us on Twitter at V&S Pod. You can email the show, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page for the Various and Sundry podcast, so you can give us a like and a follow there. And if you would be so moved, we'd love for you to head on over to the podcast app and leave us a 5-star rating. And even if you'd like to go above and beyond that, a lovely little review of the show would be appreciated.
Yeah, you can write whatever you want in the review, but we need 5 stars.
That's right.
We're open to criticism. Just leave us a 5-star review.
Yes. So, this being episode 52, I think we should even just start by acknowledging we did not think that we would record 52 episodes this year.
Yeah, we made it a full year doing weekly episodes. Now, we were aided by the fact that we couldn't travel or really go anywhere. But
yes.
But yeah, we recorded 52 episodes. You know, pat us on the back. Though I wouldn't necessarily expect that in the coming years. But maybe it's a bar to shoot for, something to shoot for.
We will see. So, let's get to our sports update here. So, we're recording on Tuesday morning, which means that week 16 in the NFL is done.
Yeah. Yep.
And probably the biggest headline from the weekend was the fact that your New York Football Jets defeated the Cleveland Browns in a stunning upset.
Yeah, I mean, this was aided by, I think, the majority of the Browns wide receiving core got COVID or contact tracing, so none of them could play, and so they were bringing guys up from the practice squad. And I
think it was like 7 wide receivers were unavailable. That's pretty deep into the roster if you're.
And so I remember reading that the Browns are just going to run the ball. They're just going to run the ball, and that helps the Browns. You know, that was sort of thing. And then Nate in Ohio texted me that they threw on the first, I can't remember, 7 of 9 plays, and he just went, "This is going to be a disaster." And
he was right.
It turned out badly for the Browns. So now, if you think about the Jets lost 2 weeks ago to the Oakland Raiders on a last-second play. They won last week, and they won this week. If that play at the end of the Oakland goes differently, we're looking at a 3-game streak.
Yeah, but I do remember at the beginning of the year of the season, us having this conversation about the Jets' habit of doing things like this, where they'll start a year like 0-6, 0-7, and then they'll win like, 5 of their last 7 or something like that, just enough to diminish their draft chances, their draft pick, so that they don't get the top pick. And in a lesser degree, they've done that again this year, enough to guarantee now that they will not have the first pick in the NFL draft.
Yep. And we'll have the second pick. So whatever that is worth, we'll have the second pick. It's just what it is at this point. We'll see what happens through free agency. We'll see what happens through the draft. There's a new regime. Hopefully they fire the coach next week and we can all be happy.
Do you think there's any actual doubt that they'll fire the coach?
Well, I saw a news report over the weekend. If Gase didn't win this game, they were going to fire him. Keep winning, you keep your job. But I just can't imagine he's going to keep his job past Monday next week.
Yeah, I can't envision that either.
Gotta go. It's been bad.
Well, so we've got 1 week left in the regular season, and a good handful of playoff spots still available. One of the bigger games will be the Steelers and the Browns. Even though the Steelers have now clinched the AFC North, the Browns, despite looking very strong a few weeks ago, are now actually in a position where they could conceivably miss the playoffs.
Well, they're in that very good division with the Steelers, who started the season. What did they start? 8-0, something like that.
It was 11-0.
11-0, and the Ravens, who were a favorite Super Bowl pick by many to start the year. So, they're in a tough spot.
Yes, so we'll see how that all shakes out. The NBA season has begun.
Yeah, so 3 or 4 games deep, I think.
Yeah, so only very initial things. Have you watched any NBA action?
I have not. I don't have cable, and so getting NBA games on network is difficult.
They really don't exist on broadcast network anymore until you get past the NFL season, and then you get like maybe an ABC game on a Sunday afternoon.
I was thinking ABC has games on the weekends, but that's about it. Everything's on cable, so I haven't watched any games. I keep up with scores, but that's about it.
No NBA League Pass for you?
No, not yet. I think I want the Knicks to be good, so probably for the next 6-7 years, I probably won't bother.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of the NBA, your Knicks.
Yeah.
Good solid start, but probably the biggest sort of eye-opener was they beat Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks by 20.
Yeah, that was, I remember checking that game at halftime, and that was very exciting. So it's a young team, young roster with Tom Thibodeau, who's frankly hit or miss as a coach. But if those young players buy into Thibodeau's system of defense, which they seem to at the start of the year, I think they could be better than they have been in the past.
We shall see. I think the other notable result so far was, and this happened on Sunday as I was driving back from Omaha, and my son was updating me. He's like, "Hey, Dad, by the way, the Mavs are up 50 on the Clippers at halftime."
Yeah, I saw that.
Which I think was the largest halftime deficit in NBA history.
I think so. I think I read that.
Now, it should be noted the Clippers did not have Kawhi Leonard on the floor for this game.
Still,
that's terrible. That's just beyond awful. I mean, the Mavs are good. They're a good, solid playoff team. But I mean, that's just unthinkable.
The Mavs didn't have Porzingis on the floor for that game, though. I mean, they were missing one of their pillars.
Yeah, just a weird. And I have caught a little bit a little bit of a few games here and there on Christmas Day, and it's still just a weird look. I mean, they're out of the bubble now, but they are playing, so they're playing in their home arenas, but no fans.
Yeah, I think the NBA is different, or at least it feels different, because the NBA, when you're watching on TV, you can see the fans.
Yes.
You can see them even interact with players at times. NFL game, you really can't see them at all. Baseball, you can, but it doesn't impact the game quite as much. Like the fans aren't on the floor with players like they are in the NBA.
Yeah, and I've noticed this watching some college basketball as well, that it's stunning when you see some of these college games, because they've got the bleachers pushed back and that sort of stuff to give more space for the social distancing on the bench. And there's no, like, it has the look and feel of a scrimmage. Mm-hmm. It feels like they've just opened the gym and, they got, two teams going at it in a preseason scrimmage that normally would just be a closed door affair. But in the COVID era here, we've got, this weird dynamic of watching games that look like this just feels like a scrimmage and hearing literally everything on the floor, which has created some challenges for the people responsible for bleeping out some salty language.
Yeah, those laser mics aren't nearly as fashionable when you're picking up profanity all the time.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, and since it is the last week of the year here, we are approaching the college football playoff. We've got Alabama and Notre Dame playing in the Rose Bowl, which is being played in Dallas,
which isn't the Rose Bowl, but
at Jerry World, yes. And you've got the Sugar Bowl hosting Clemson versus the Ohio State University, which should be a really good game.
Is that New Orleans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And this is the matchup Ohio State fans have wanted. Most, if not all, Ohio State fans feel like they got hosed against Clemson last year, and so getting a rematch, I think, is what a lot of Ohio State fans wanted. We will see how that turns out.
We'll see what happens. And those are New Year's Day, correct?
New Year's Day, yeah. Okay. The Bama Notre Dame game is the early game at 4, and the Clemson Ohio State game is at 8. So,
okay,
we'll see how that goes. Speaking of seeing how things go, no one could have predicted how 2020 went, and so it's our main topic for today is just kind of the year in review, thinking back on 2020 as well as the podcast itself. So.
Yeah, it's a little state of the podcast episode. Yes. Instead of State of the Union that's given by the president, this is the state of the pod.
Okay, all right, the state of the pod. Well, let's start with kind of what we initially envisioned. We've told the origins story of the podcast before, so we don't need to rehash that necessarily. But let's maybe start with what we kind of envisioned this podcast being and hope for it to be when we first pressed the record button.
Yeah, and I'll throw out my thinking, and then Doc, you can add to it. But my hopes were that we would have my greatest hopes, honestly, were that we would have a small but committed listenership that would engage with us, interact with us. I was hoping, I think my wildest dreams were 50 downloads a week, that we would see consistent downloads coming in, and that we would, you and I have every other week meeting and opportunity to be together and just talk things honestly that we talk about anyway. What were you hoping for in addition to some of those things?
I'd say pretty similarly. I think that I probably was hoping for maybe a little bit, a few more downloads a week than you were. I mean, I thought, man, if we could get to just a basic between 50 and 100, I'd be pretty thrilled with that. And yeah, I mean, the heart behind this has from the beginning been, in one sense, taking public our typical conversations from Sunday afternoons in the basement, which unfortunately, because of life circumstances and such, don't actually happen anymore.
No, they don't.
Which is a bit of an irony when it comes to the origins of the podcast. But so I've been pleasantly surprised at how things have developed, and I think that the whole we had sort of set the every other week as a target, and then things just kind of got away from us in a good way.
We are 1 year later at our episode 52.
Yeah. So do you want to start with just some basic statistics on what's going on with the pod here?
Yeah. So obviously we ended up doing a weekly podcast every week. In that first week, so I believe we dropped the preview episode on like December 15th. Does that sound right?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
If we did that on December 15th, on December 16th, we had 76 downloads, which is way more than I expected for our preview episode, which was crazy to me. But 1 year later, we have over 8,000 downloads, which is, I'll let you do the math at home, but that's far more than we ever anticipated having. And goodness, by the time this drops and we gain, we'll have a couple hundred more. Yeah, that's far beyond anywhere the numbers that we expected. Over our time, we've hit almost all 50 states. We have not had downloads in New Mexico, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, New Hampshire, or Vermont, or Maine, and Hawaii. We have not had any downloads in Hawaii. Every other state, though, we've had a download in.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the map. You've got two pockets, really. You've got the far northeast, and then the upper Midwest slash West as our gaps. And in terms of top 5 states when it comes to downloads, some of these are going to be, I think, pretty predictable, right? Indiana, obviously, we're based here in Winona Lake, Indiana.
Sure.
Ohio, Illinois, 3rd, Michigan, 4th. So the surrounding states, the Great Lakes. And then this one was a little surprising to me. Coming in at 5th, Virginia.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible.
That's interesting. So shout out to our Virginia peeps.
Yeah.
And then when you look at cities, that it more or less follows that kind of that same pattern, right? So in terms of cities, obviously you'd expect South Bend / Elkhart, which is the area that includes Warsaw when they start to kind of draw the metropolitan area maps, leads the way. Second is Columbus, Ohio. So our affection for the Buckeyes is paying dividends here in the great state of Ohio. Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Chicago, and then Washington, D.C.
Crazy. Yeah. And specifically Hagerstown, Maryland, I think.
Yeah. Just out. Yeah. I don't know how that's calculated, but
I don't know either. Yeah.
So clearly we are power brokers in the world's most powerful city, right? I mean,
that's right. And then coming in after that is the Cleveland, Akron area.
Yes.
And then right after that, I think surprisingly is Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yeah, that's an interesting one as well.
And I know we have I think a pastor in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Do you know him that listens pretty regularly?
I think I know who that is. If it's the person I'm thinking of, I think he and his wife attended Ohio University, and so we knew them from our days in Crew. And he used to be a pastor in Iowa, and now he's moved up to Minnesota. So I think that's at least one of the reasons why, I think.
Okay. But still, more downloads than episodes there.
Yeah.
Texas have quite a few downloads as well. California and Oregon have quite a few.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know Dave in Oregon is helping us out there, but
and Emily is also listening along, a former student.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So beyond the United States, though, I think this has been one of the surprises to us, hasn't it? That we are a truly international podcast now.
Yes.
And outside of the United States, we have downloads from 29 other countries besides the United States. I did not expect that coming into the year.
Nope. And not just the ones you would expect either. We have some interesting ones. Probably our biggest one is it looks like Spain and France are right there at the top, as well as
and Ireland
is very popular. We're making waves on the continent. And then, interestingly enough, and I'm trying to find, there it is, Israel. We have several downloads in Israel. I don't know what that's about.
I don't know either. And then Belgium rounds out the top 5 there in terms of total downloads. But we also have some downloads from countries that we are especially tickled by.
Yes, we have, and they're not very many downloads, but they're still fun to think about somebody listening to them or using a VPN that's pinging that area of the world, I guess, is possible as well. Finland, that we have been to.
Yes.
So Russia, which we aspire to go to.
Yes.
Which, by the way, Russia is huge.
In terms of landmass, I think I heard at one point, I think this probably included when the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union at one point was 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. So Russia is just colossal.
I think I read somewhere one time it has like 14 different time zones in the country itself.
Yeah, it's crazy. But we've got some downloads there.
Yes, some downloads in Australia, Japan that you and I have been to, the United Kingdom. I mean, we're South America as well. Uruguay, not Uganda. Sorry, I moved the mouse cursor a little quick there. No downloads in Uganda yet. Uruguay.
In fact, we haven't hit the African continent yet.
No, we haven't hit Africa at all.
That and Antarctica are the two continents that we have yet to break.
Yeah, so we've spanned the globe, which I think was really surprising to us. I think when we had our first European download, I think we were texting back and forth, just like, "Oh my gosh, did you see this?"
Yes, indeed.
And now I get worried when I see that. Why weren't we downloaded in Spain this week? Or
right.
I get frustrated with the Spanish.
Well, I think it's appropriate to say that we if you are one of our international listeners, we would love to not only hear from you, but if you would like to invite us to your country.
Oh yeah,
we would be more than happy to record do a live recording in your lovely country. Now, obviously, with COVID going on, that we'd have to sort of plan a little ways out to make that happen. But I'm just going to throw that out there. If you want us to come to your homeland and to record an episode, we are very open to negotiations on that front.
Or frankly, we just love to hear from you. We have not heard from one of these international people yet, and we'd love to hear about their life, frankly.
Yes, indeed.
Doc, what have been our most downloaded episodes? What's been most popular with the people?
Yes. So besides the preview episode, which makes sense, when people hear about the podcast and they go to check it out for the first time, it makes sense they'd probably check out the shorter preview episode. Besides that, and if you had asked me to guess before I looked at the numbers, I would have guessed this episode. It was our interview with Dane Ortland, author of Gentle and Lowly. And actually, the very first episode that we discussed the book was also one of our highest episodes in terms of downloads. Episode 1, all the way back in January, first week of January.
Which that also makes sense as still be at the top of the list for sure.
Yeah. Where we talked about books, we talked about New Year's resolutions. And then I might have guessed this as well. The fifth most was our episode on singleness.
As well as, I believe that was the Super Bowl episode. We were talking about the Super Bowl. And David Wright. You don't think David Wright was the pull?
Strangely, I don't think he was moving the needle on that one.
What was so drawing about that episode? Do you think if you were gonna, that one's been high for a while. That one's always been sort of in our top 5.
Well, I think part of it is this is our guess in terms of audience. I think a chunk of our audience is in that college student, young professional window. And I think that's a pretty, a pretty relevant topic for a lot of that part of our audience. And quite frankly, I think it's a topic that's not often talked about in the evangelical community with such an emphasis on family and marriage and those kinds of things. I think oftentimes singleness is not talked about very often, or even very thoughtfully, to be honest. And I think when you talk about singleness, that kind of resonates with people in terms of maybe their experience in the church, maybe how the church hasn't always done the best job of caring for singles and valuing singles in the church with such an emphasis on family that that might have resonated in that way.
Yeah, it might be a topic worth revisiting. In future pods. Doc, any particular highlights you want to mention as we think about the past year? Like what are you going to remember most from podcasting in 2020?
Well, I think that a couple things come to mind. One is really just the our interview with Dane Ortland. I think that was just a great experience, and that was our first sort of venturing out beyond just the two of us talking, and bringing in a third person into the mix. And I was pleased with how that went. And I feel like we were kind of out in front a little bit on the buzz on Gentle and Lowly. Like we had sort of identified that as, here's a book we're going to read together. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we announced that, basically, you couldn't buy a copy of that book anywhere. It was sold out at major retailers and such. And while, of course, on a humorous level, I'd love to think we were responsible for that. Obviously, we had kind of gotten out in front of the buzz on that. And that book has made just about every single, best books of 2020 list when it comes to Christian books. So it was a big get for the podcast to get an interview with him.
It was, and it was. He was gracious. He was kind. He was great. If you haven't listened to that episode, or it's been a while, I think it'd be worth to go back and listen to again.
And John, what else were we out in front on in the year 2020 on the podcast?
We were way out in front of this. We were talking about. I think we were talking about COVID in January. Were we talking about it in January?
I think at least end of January. And why were we out in front of this, John?
Well, I had a trip to Taiwan coming up. And Taiwan, if you're not familiar with how the geography of Taiwan. It's right off the coast of China. So I was supposed to take 10, 11 students to Taiwan with me, and China was just blowing up with this disease. And so I was tracking it, seeing where it was, seeing how things were going, and we were following it, and we were having a lot of fun with it. If you go back and listen, we're almost probably too casual about it, seeing what eventually happened.
Sure.
We ended up canceling that trip, and so we were tracking it long before it was even a big deal in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about anything in terms of maybe some hopes for 2021 when it comes to the podcast. What are some things maybe that we'd like to try to do? What comes to mind when you think of that?
Yeah, some solid things that we'd like to do that I think we're going to do. I think we'd like to read another book together with our listeners. Take 2 or 3 weeks, probably in the summer, and read through a book. You and I discuss it. We invite questions, comments, and then hopefully we can have more guests. Do some of those things, as well as hopefully even maybe in 2021 record at some conferences. We didn't get to go to any conferences this year, but it might be nice to record at some conferences. Yeah. What about what do you think of? What hopes do you have?
Well, I would love for us to record a live episode. I know we have been in preliminary discussions with a powerful person at an institution that we are both familiar with about recording a live episode in a larger venue. But those negotiations still ongoing, still very preliminary.
Yeah.
COVID obviously becoming a big factor with that.
I don't know if they can afford our fee,
Yes, that could be a little tricky. So we'll have to negotiate that out a little bit. Well, as we kind of wrap up this review of the pod, the state of the pod, I thought it'd be good for us to talk a little bit about just some of the main stories that were prominent in the areas of the podcast that we like to talk about. So, we talk about sports, we talk about theology and ministry, we talk about books. We talk about travel if you can actually do it, which we can't. So that we can just kind of cross that one off the list. But
sure.
Let's start with sports. When you think of 2020, what are some of those sports memories that come to mind that you're going to probably look back on years from now?
Yeah, I think the day Rudy Gobert got COVID and basically shut down sports entirely in a single moment. It felt like, it just kind of everything started canceling, and it was just a domino effect, including March Madness.
Yeah, that for me, because I actually had tickets to the Big Ten tournament, basketball tournament in Indianapolis. And the Big Ten had announced that they were going to keep playing, I think even after the NBA said, we're going to stop. And so we had tickets for like the next day, I think. They played it. Yeah, I think they played a day. They still had fans. They were still figuring this thing out.
Yeah.
And then we were supposed to have tickets for the next day. And that's when they decided, not only are we ending having fans, we're just calling the tournament. And then, of course, March Madness getting canceled, all of that sort of evolving that way. But I remember us being, texting back and forth, like, are they going to, is the tournament going to happen? Like, they're going to cancel this now. Another sports story, and this feels like it was a decade ago because it was pre-COVID, was Kobe Bryant dying in a helicopter crash. And, us texting back and forth. I remember that very vividly, and initial reports coming out. And then you find out that, one of his daughters was on the helicopter with him, and just tragic.
Yeah.
But also just some of the response to it just felt like I was a little caught off guard by how much of a cultural moment that was.
Oh yeah. It felt like the world was unified in loving Kobe Bryant, which he had a checkered past. He wasn't always as uniformly loved as he was in that moment.
Yeah. You had a couple of New York specific sports moments that I'm sure you'll remember.
Yeah. The Mets got a new owner, which they're still dancing in the streets of Queens over this. For years we've been plagued by an owner who didn't have any money and was always trying to tighten the belt, and was bad with PR. I mean, it was just a bad public relations person. A new owner who seems to be doing pretty well, but the bar was set pretty low. And then probably in the last couple of weeks, the Jets almost losing the entire season, going 0-16, but winning the last 2 games. So they've lost the number 1 pick, but still, I mean, the number 2 pick's a very good pick. It just doesn't have that blonde girl that person won't be available. So, those things stick out to me. I think one of the more interesting sports stories was college football and how each of the different conferences did different things. And you were frustrated by the Big Ten's decisions during this time.
Yeah, the Big Ten leadership was especially stupid, and it was striking that within a week, the Big Ten had released its modified schedule, basically to say we're going to play just a conference-only schedule, no non-conference games, everything's fine. And then a week later, it was, psych, we're canceling the season. And it was pretty clear they thought that the other conferences would follow suit. They thought that they were kind of being the leader, we're out in front of this. And then actually the SEC and the ACC were like, we're not going to join in your stupidity. We can do this. So then the Big Ten had to backtrack, and eventually, after enormous pressure, came up with another stupid plan to try to play 8 games in 8 weeks with no buffer for cancellations because of COVID outbreaks. And of course, that caused problems that we've talked about on the pod, and it's become pretty clear that nobody likes the current Big Ten commissioner, who was new this year. Tough year to take over, but we don't need to relitigate that. What about any big stories that you'll remember in terms of the area of theology and ministry?
I mean, one thing that really comes to mind, 2020 ministry, pastoral, right? You had people in churches divided over everything, from race to politics, to masking, to all these things. I think all these things were huge dividers in 2020. And I think those each presented unique, difficult pastoral issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Pastors having to deal with all sorts of issues that they probably never anticipated having to deal with based on their seminary education. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the long-term effects are of some of those divisions that have become evident within evangelical churches over politics, over race, and after effects of differences of opinion on how to respond to COVID and such like that. But what about notable books from 2020?
Well, we've already mentioned Dane Ortland's book, Gentle and Lowly. I think that may have been the only 2020 publication I read this year. I think everything may have been from from past years, I think. But you had a couple of books that came out this year that I have thumbed through. I have not given a full read yet, but you had two books that published. One came out. What was that? October?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Rebels and Exiles, a biblical theology of sin and restoration.
And we have an episode where I interview you about that book.
Yeah.
And that was done quite well. If you go back in the numbers, it has done quite well. And I think it got boosted by the publisher, which is always helpful.
Yeah. And then just this month, another book, The Servant of the Lord and His Servant People. That's in the New Studies in Biblical Theology series that actually originates in the UK. So it has been published in the UK. It will not be available here in the US until next month, until January of 2021.
And we plan to do an episode about that at some point.
Yeah. Well, as we wind down this state of the pod, we wanted to probably hit just a few at least of these. There were some notable deaths in 2020 in the world of sports. We've already mentioned Kobe Bryant. Anyone else that stands out to you? We've got a whole list here. We won't go through the entire thing, but anyone else that stands out to you?
Tom Seaver, great Mets pitcher on the '69 World Series team, does stick out to me. Let's see, J.I. Packer. Not
away. A sports figure, just to
not
be
a
clear.
Sports figure. No. No, not a sports figure that I'm aware of. Those are as I'm looking through the first 2-3 lines there. Those are two that stick out to me. What
and
about
we did a whole episode on the death of J.I. Packer and his legacy and that sort of thing. So,
and any that stick out to you in this list?
Well, under sports, I'll just mention Don Shula, legendary NFL coach for Colts and Dolphins. I think he still has the career record for most wins as a coach in the NFL. We haven't really talked about politics or history, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice, passing away in September, I think, late September, which obviously created some interesting political dynamics. What about under pop culture, John? We've got several to choose from here.
Yeah, I'd probably highlight the first three. Goodness, it's so hard to choose. I'm just going to list them.
Yeah.
Alex Trebek passed away.
Yep.
The Jeopardy guy. Sean Connery passed away.
Yeah.
Legendary. Chadwick Boseman passed away far too young. He had hid his cancer from people for I think a number of years and passed away. In fact, I think his last movie is just coming out right now. Jerry Stiller, father to Ben, but also father to George on Seinfeld.
Yes.
Go ahead.
You got to mention Regis Philbin. I mean,
Regis Philbin. Yes. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, talk show host, seemed to have more energy than anybody else ever. I'd also add, and this is partly because of a podcast I enjoy, Linda Tripp died.
Yes.
Famous in the Clinton scandal, the Monica Lewinsky affair.
Yeah. Absolutely. Also, Eddie Van Halen, of course, and Kenny Rogers, the gambler. You got to know when to hold him, know when to fold him, know when to walk away. Classic.
All right. Well, Doc, we're going way too long here. How about we pick an athlete and do one thing?
Let's do it. Athletes for episode 52. We've got Ray Lewis, linebacker for the Ravens from 96 to 2012. Mike Webster, center for the Steelers on those dominant 70s teams that the Steelers had. CC Sabathia, pitcher for the Indians, the Brewers, and the Yankees, pitched from 2001 to 2019. And Jamal Wilkes was a forward for the Lakers from 1974 to 1985. 2 entries from the Ohio State University. Jonathan Hankins was a defensive tackle from 2010 to 2012. And then Wyatt Davis, a current guard on the Ohio State team, who will, in all likelihood, be a first-round draft pick, was a All-American this year. So out of that list, John, who do you like for episode 52?
Well, since we're in a hurry, I'll narrow it down to 2. I like Ray Lewis and I like CC Sabathia.
Okay. I would lean towards going with CC Sabathia. He was a guy that didn't look like a professional athlete necessarily. He was a big guy, 6'6", but like over 300 pounds, and just did not have the sort of normal body type that you look at and go, oh, he's an athlete, you know.
Yeah, but he won. He had double-digit wins for 13 years. 2001 to 2013 had double-digit wins every year.
Yep, and was also kind of well known for wearing his hat a little crooked.
Yeah.
So just had a little bit of a different vibe about him. So
good pitcher.
Yeah, that'd be my preference.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, CC Sabathia it is. One thing you liked, John.
Well, for Christmas this year, I was with Andrea's family for Christmas for the first time. And her dad went into his baseball card collection and gifted to me on Christmas Day old Mets baseball cards.
Wow.
So he got me a card of the 1969 World Series team.
Okay.
That's pretty cool, and it has all the team leaders on the back, and then the Tom Seaver 1969 Cy Young pitching leaders.
Okay.
And so Tom Seaver won 25 games that year, which is unheard of today.
Yeah.
And right behind him was Phil, I'm going to mispronounce this, Niekro of the Braves, who just passed away this last week.
Niekro.
Excuse me.
Knuckleball pitcher. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. For me, when you have a long drive out to Omaha and back, that's prime time for some podcasting. And so I listened to American History Tellers. It's done by Lindsey Graham, who's the same guy who did 1865. Mm-hmm. And they do like sets of episodes. So I listened to the set of episodes. It was 6 episodes plus an interview on the Cold War, which was very fascinating, just to hear the history of that. And Lindsey Graham does a great job with that, and highly recommend his stuff. But that's American History Tellers. So that was my one thing that I liked this week.
All right. Well, Doc, I think we've arrived.
Yes, mission accomplished, I think. And you'll have to forgive me if I'm getting a little emotional here. Like, this is the end of our first year of podcasting.
Yeah.
We made it, John.
We've arrived.
We have successfully completed episode 52. The critics said it wouldn't happen. The doubters said we couldn't do it. And we have successfully recorded an episode a week for the entirety of 2020.
Awesome.
Yes. So in light of that, we can say mission accomplished. And thank you to all of our listeners who've joined us this year. And we look forward to an even better year in 2021. And with that, all that's left to say is the Lord bless you all real good.
Later.